Hi, friends. Thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach Podcast. I'm Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Concussion Coach Podcast. Today, we get to continue our conversation that we started last week with Shelley Latendresse, and I am so excited to hear more from her. As a quick review, Shelley is an occupational therapist in British Columbia, and she wrote a concise summary of last week's conversation as a bit of a teaser if you haven't listened to it yet. So she said, it's my story of resilience, recurring concussions, lack of good concussion care, how I treated myself as an OT. Mostly it was good, but a few things got overlooked. Loneliness, anger, zombie brain, power of activity, snowshoes, bike, yoga. So feel free to pause this and go back and listen to part one of this conversation first, if you want to hear kind of the background. And it was a really good conversation, and I'm excited to be continuing it. So it was interesting too. After our conversation last week, Shelley told me that that was the first time that she has shared the whole thing, her whole experience, and that it was actually really challenging for her to do. So I am very, very grateful that she was willing to be so open and vulnerable and to share with us this extended experience that has been a part of her story. And I'm grateful that she's back to share more with us of the things that she's learned and what she's found to be particularly helpful for her in her own recovery, as well as for her clients. So thank you so much for being with us again, Shelley. I'm excited for this conversation.
I'm super happy to be here.
Yay. Okay. Well, let's continue on here. So we got a good feel for kind of a lot of the things that happened and things that were challenging and how you solved them in a lot of the ways, which was really great last time. But I don't think we fully finished. So I want to hear kind of how you're doing today, what you're still dealing with related to concussions. And you had mentioned that the chronic concussions stopped in 2021. So I want to hear about how you got to that point.
Sounds great. Well, how am I doing today? I am definitely still active and adventurous, or back to being active and adventurous. I don't think that actually ever left me. And that's a key piece is I never really left who I was behind. I always kept that going. I'm still outdoorsy, have a need for adrenaline. I would say that I am less reckless, or I suppose you could say more mindful, depending on how you want to word that. So now I include in my life practices for slowing down and regulating, like my sauna, cold plunge, my yoga, a lot more mindful walks, not always just racing off. So although I do still need I recognize my own need for my high dopamine, high adrenaline practices. So that's why I do ride bike, hike and run, and I swim. But I do have now those other mindful practices in my life, which I know that I need. Let's see. Of course, I'm going to tell you everything I can do first, because that's the way I think.
Good. I like
that. I can go in a hammock. I can go in a swing. I can jump on a trampoline. I can ride a mountain bike. And I do have some residual spinal issues, which sometimes do cause me some cervical dizziness and brain fatigue and headaches. I also recognize I am more prone to concussion than the average person. And so I'm just constantly working on my balance, my neck strength, my spatial awareness. But I don't see that as a disability or debilitating. I just see that as something I need to just be aware of and always challenge myself to the next thing. So I never use that as a limitation. In fact, I have a tattoo on my arm right here that says limitless that I got in the middle of all the concussions.
Beautiful.
So yeah, that's sort of where I am now. I'm always working on my next thing. In fact, today I just posted a reel that I've decided I'm going to learn how to do my figure skating turns again. That's it. I'm going to dance and twirl and throw my head around, and that's my next goal. I'm working on that. So
That's awesome. Oh my goodness. That feels like a really big deal for someone who's what you've dealt with. That's amazing.
It is a big deal. It is a big deal, but I see that as another mini challenge. And I guess coming back to that whole, like, do I see myself as less adventurous and less kind of wild? No, I see myself as having more mindful. Yes. Do I see things as an obstacle? No, I see them as a challenge. So I think that's like, if I see a log, like I'm out on a hike and I see a log I can walk across, or a river I can cross across the rocks, or a swing that just happens to be hanging there. Somehow I come across these. I don't know where I play outside, but this is just another example of like choosing my mindset. So I see that as a mini challenge. I do not see that as an obstacle. So, and I approach it just more mindfully, less recklessly, with a little more thought and careful. But I do think that that piece about choosing my mindset, that has honestly been actually a big piece of my recovery. Like, I guess you could say believing in myself and my belief in neuroplasticity, choosing to see this new soft, quieter activities and this mindfulness thing as a positive thing, seeing opportunities for growth in all these little challenges instead of like just saying I can't. In fact, I don't say I can't. It's just not a word that I use. So
I love that so much. And I think I believe it, especially since you started out the conversation with what I can do. So I love that mindset, that perspective, and your belief in self and in neuroplasticity. Like if I think it's such a powerful example for all of us, but also really important to recognize if we believe that those things are possible, then we can access hope. And like if the possibility is there, then we can go for it. If we turn ourselves off to that even possibility, then there's no point in doing anything, right? So I really do love that idea, that perspective. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Yeah, I just think that piece, you hit it on the nose. That piece is key, is how your perspective, getting a bigger perspective, and keeping it your mindset in the right direction, because where your mind goes, that's where your body follows. So that's what I believe.
Yeah. How did those chronic concussions end up ceasing? What brought you to that point?
Good point. I would say things changed. Part of it, I did get some detailed eyes on me to address those little things, like my little vestibular visual mismatches. My neck needed a bit more attention. I was missing things happening behind me, stuff like that. So I got a physical therapist to pick that apart a bit. And I really studied it myself also, so that I truly understood. And I want to make that known to people, is like, you need to know, not just your therapist know what's wrong. You need to know where your little detailed missing pieces are, so that you can work on that. And you need to really understand it, so work on that in your real life. Then also just understanding and getting control of my nervous system. So understanding which reactions in my body, what was happening, where my nervous system was at. Because of course, on your Garmin or your Fitbit, it doesn't say like P and S for parasympathetic and sympathetic. I wish it did, but no, but it's not on there. You have to figure that out. So really getting control of that too, and having real practices that really, really work on nervous system regulation. So that was a huge piece. And like I said, just slowing down, getting a mindful approach more, really being mindful. I mean, I'd go for a walk with my friends and they'd be like, sidewalk, pole, tree. Like they would just talk like that on these friendship walks. And in fact, a friend of mine just did it the other day and I laughed at her. I was like, I actually don't need that anymore. I'm good.
So they were doing that to help you to feel grounded and like make it more mindful.
Yes.
That's so cute.
Yeah. And just so I wouldn't run into anything else. And just, try to be this good friend of safety, creating safety. And it became a kind of a funny thing, but it was actually I saw it as very like caring, it was kind of funny, like an affectionate thing that they did because of my lack of safety. Yeah. So getting the key components, getting control of my nervous system, slowing down and becoming mindful, and then using my bike as therapy. So truly keeping a passion in my life was key. And I know that I needed movement We talked about snowshoeing in the last episode, is how I got through that first winter. And then in the spring and the nicer seasons, I moved on to getting back onto my bike. And I did it safely. And this is part of where being an OT came in, because I was able to break down the task and reintegrate myself bit by bit to the bike. But I used it, I would say, as my cardio, my blood flow, my oxygen, my vision therapy, and eventually, my sense of normalcy, my sense of sanity, social, because I ride with a group. So many pieces that fit into place. Even when I was riding adapted rides, like just going a small distance on a country road instead of riding and drafting with the group, it still gave me stuff that I needed. And so I didn't drop my bike. I kept it as part of my therapy, but I just was able to carefully move back into it strategically. That's where my OT skills, I think, really helped me.
Could you, just in case there's somebody out there listening who really loves riding bikes and they want to get back into it, can you just give a super brief overview of how you would recommend somebody get back into it again?
That's a great question. I actually did a 1-hour workshop on that. I'll try and summarize it. So for me, we were talking earlier about, I feel the cardio piece and getting oxygen and blood flow to the brain. I really feel like I personally felt like the outdoors, maybe riding at sea level, riding out in the cold, really gave me more. Like even when my, say, vision and dizziness at the beginning was off and I didn't feel safe going back on, I actually put my bike on a trainer on the patio outside and started there on the deck, looking out over the ocean. And now I would start riding there because it just didn't get the same feeling in the gym. And I'm not sure if that has to do with the power of nature or the oxygen. I definitely want to look into that. But then basically it was just breaking down the task. And so when I would first go back to get on my bike, I would literally ride 10 minutes down the country road, and I would have rules for myself. Like, you can't touch the water bottle. You don't talk to anybody. You're by yourself, so that it just broke down. So it wasn't so many multi-systems going at once. And then I would move a little further onto something where there might be a traffic light or cars, and then eventually I could pull out my water bottle. Eventually I could go for half an hour. Eventually I could go with a friend and talk, so I just had to move through the stages that way. But it was a lot of analysis along the way of my neck position, my posture, my focus, my peripheral vision, my turning of my head. So it's pretty detailed, but that's where my OT piece, I think, really did come in. And I was able to gradually move back. But a starting place would be obviously on the stationary bike. But for me in the gym, it just didn't cut it. I just didn't get that rush of brain chemicals. I didn't feel the cardio endorphins, that I get from riding outside. So that's how it went down for me. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Okay.
No problem. And also keeping in mind, I rode a high level of road biking before. So you have to always know somebody's background and don't put them on a gym bike right away and assume that's all they can do if they're a professional cyclist or a high level recreational cyclist, because that's not going to do it for them. So you have to look at someone's background and skill. If they were good at it before, it's going to be a lot easier to get back into. Put it that way.
Thank you. I love that OT perspective there. Make sure you know and their background. Excellent. So I know this next question is kind of, it's just one that I always like to ask people, and we didn't get a chance to ask last time. So I want to make sure that we throw it out there. Any advice that you have for people who are supporting someone who is dealing with a concussion? I want advice for the loved ones in this situation. Unless, sorry, actually, did we finish the last?
No, that's good. Actually, that leads into what I was just saying, because I got a lot of flack for going back on my road bike from people, my family. Well, you go do something so dangerous when you're still brain injured, like stupid stuff like that. And that just didn't sit well with me. And so I think it's really hard for someone who sees your safety at risk and sees here you are having multiple concussions. Like, what are you doing going back into these sort of quote unquote, high adrenaline, high speed, high risk sport? But the thing is first of all, when I'm in the zone on my bike. I am so on. I never had a concussion on my road bike. And even if I had, the fact is when I'm on my road bike, I'm like focused and really turned on, and I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And if I didn't feel good about it and I didn't feel like my systems were ready, I wouldn't be there. I would not put myself on the bike if I felt at risk. And so I think just having some trust a little bit in what the person chooses to do, unless they're being crazy and reckless. So there's that. So that's just like a piece. And then supporting your friend in a fun and humorous way, like I talked about before with my friends on the walks, right? Just kind of like tree, pole, sidewalk, all that kind of funny stuff. And I think having some sense of normalcy, not asking, oh, you must be better now. How are you doing? Oh, you look good. I guess it's better now. It must be just anxiety left, blah, 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 blah. Like, just don't say certain stuff. Like, it doesn't help the person. So, and it's innocent enough. Everybody wants you to be better, to say like, oh, you must be better now. You look good. But it's just, unfortunately, concussion is invisible. So I think just providing a sense of normalcy, trusting the person and believing the person and listening to them if they want to talk about it. Yeah, I guess that's kind of what it came down to for me. I wish that they just had the knowledge, because my friends who knew, it was just like we didn't have to talk about it. The knowledge was just there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that just makes, you don't really want to talk about it all the time. But if the knowledge is just there in the background, it just makes life so much more normal. And you need to feel a sense of normalcy because you're living while healing, right? That's like, I had 4, 5, 6 years like that. So I had to be just still living.
Yes. So, yeah. That's such an important point. And I think the last point about having the knowledge is something that has come up quite a few times. So I do think that's a valuable point, that if we can, as loved ones and support systems, if we can educate ourselves about it, then we are not having to ask all the time, or like we're able to understand more what's going on, and it can just have a more informed conversation when the conversation does come up.
Yeah, totally. And like I liked humor also. Like, I personally don't mind. That's just the way my family is like, we joke about stuff, we joke about ourselves and that. And so that was okay for me. And so it actually helped me to laugh about stuff. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us a little bit. I know you mentioned this before as well, the yoga piece, and I imagine that's part of the grounding and the mindfulness stuff. So I know that you're very passionate about yoga and how helpful it has been for you. I would love to hear more about that. Tell us about yoga, why it, and how it's helpful, all the things.
I'd love to. Yeah, thanks for letting me blab about activity, snowshoes, bike, and now yoga. But that's what OTs, that's what we love to do. Yoga is a huge piece, and I really do want to share this piece of my life and why I added it and why it helped me so much. Yoga was a piece of my life before the concussions, but it just became huge throughout my recovery. And that's because, well, for starters, it was something normal. It was like an actual normal activity, which was just kind of like I mentioned to you, there's a need to be a little bit normal when you're dealing with such a long concussion piece of your life. And so we need that. And yet it also provided, it's also self-healing. So yoga is a practice that is more holistic than just going to a rehab clinic, right? So it's this mind, body, spirit practice. And when you're doing something that you're doing it yourself, it becomes empowering. So it's self-healing. So I would be able to go to my yoga class, and I went like religiously, regularly, and I would feel like I've done something for my healing. And I would leave there feeling just a little bit better every single time. And why is that? So that's why I want to break it down. And this is why I use it in my practice as an OT. I went early on in my concussion series, I went and completed my yoga training certificate. So I'm a certified instructor, as well as my child and youth one certificate as well. So a lot of it is nervous system regulation. So within a yoga class, you are constantly using the breath. You're constantly being cued to inhale, exhale for like a whole hour and 15 minutes, right? Or an hour. And you're constantly being, reminded to notice this, to notice that about your body. and the environment. And so just think about that, a whole hour of inhale, exhale, notice. And we're trying to teach these things to people in a clinic session or whatever, but they can go in a yoga class and, if it's suited to them, which is why I teach post-concussion yoga, because I really do suit it to people who are dealing with PCS. But just that piece right there creates so much mindfulness. And also a good instructor or a therapist or who's ever teaching the yoga also is co-regulating. So breathe with me, right? Inhale, exhale. Here we go. If you feel dizzy, ground your feet. Notice what's happening in your heart rate. Notice where your breath is in your body. So they're doing it with you. And that's just like so huge. You compare a little doctor's office 10-minute visit, let's say, where they say, oh, you should do this. You compare that to being in a 60-minute class and doing it with someone. So that was just kind of a really big eye opener to me, how much bigger that is in a nervous system practice. Then also, I love talking about this little piece. We know that post-concussion, our nervous systems don't feel safe because of a lot of things, because of trauma, because of impairments in our systems like vision and vestibular and whatever. So, and because we're stuck in this flight or fight energy, we can be stuck in this fight or flight. And one thing about that being stuck is that every time your body goes into fight or flight, the first muscle to fire is actually the iliopsoas, which is across the hips, which tells us to run, right? The second thing that fires is our hands and feet, which is like fight, right? Mm-hmm. So it's fight or flight. So think about that, and spine, because the whole body freezes up. So when you go into fight or flight, you got these tense hands and feet, you've got these tight hips. So, and you've got this tense spine. Now, if you're repeatedly going into that, we're stuck in that all day long, your hands, feet, spine, and hips are constantly firing. And then that's your state of being. I can see when a person is in fight or flight. I can see it in their neck. I can see it in their hands, their feet, and usually they will have tight hips. And so the practice of yoga takes this whole body approach to the nervous system. And now we are releasing hands and feet. You're on your hands and feet, releasing, moving through them, shaking them, weight bearing. So great. You are moving the spine, releasing all that stuck energy there. And we're releasing the hips. That is a piece that's sort of, I think, overlooked sometimes in the rehab world. Like if you just sit there and do your eyes and your neck, you're not getting at the rest of it, right? You're not getting it. Also, there's stuck trauma energy. So there's different ways of looking at it. But if you want to look at it scientifically, that's why I was describing the stuck fight or flight scientifically. But there's also that holding trauma. So that is a cool piece. I don't know if ever.
So cool. I haven't put those together before. So thank you for connecting those dots for me. That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's key. It's key for nervous system change. And that's why people feel so amazing. Now, the kind of yoga that I like to teach, especially with post-concussion, and like to do is more of like a slow flow. So that involves moving slowly through positions mindfully with the breath. So we are getting release, but we're not trying to go fast and intense, and we're able to coordinate the breath. And this way, we also notice a lot more range of motion changes, mobility changes, and we're able to incorporate. Now, here's where the rehab piece comes into yoga, and I can see that a lot of physical therapists are recognizing this now, which is super cool, is that neck rehab, so cervical rehab, and vestibular and vision rehab has a lot of components that are in a yoga class, which is super cool. So, for example, neck is like postural awareness. That's a big part of the beginning of most of yoga classes. Then there's poses like, say, plank or halfway lift, where you're incorporating neck strengthening, turning on the back of the neck. Following your gaze is where you get into the vision piece, neck mobility and all of the twists. Vestibular is, we're in these positions of twisting our head or going into an inversion. So you can see how it taps into visual vision or vestibular, visual, and cervical rehab, right?
Yeah, that's fascinating. What would you say to people who are wondering if it's safe for them to do yoga? Like if they're just so triggered by their vision vestibular system, or like being inverted and putting their head down would be really, really triggering and problematic for them. How do you walk people through that, or what would you recommend for them?
Great point. So everybody's sort of at a different point, but it's definitely stepping back to where you're at and starting really gradually with the movement. So I offer, like, my program of 12 classes is progressive. So we start with smaller movement and then we move into creating safety in the more challenging ones. So you do need to, like you said, also it's helpful if they come in knowing their specifics, if they've had a good in-clinic assessment and know their specifics of the root causes of their dizziness. That's really helpful going in. But also, just starting small, really, and creating safety in the smallest change of position, and then moving into more and more gradually. And I offer a lot of adaptations also. So there's different ways you can do a supported down dog, for example. You can do your child's pose in different positions. And then because there's constant cues for breathing and grounding, and because you're on the ground, yoga itself is a grounding practice. So because of that, a lot of times, if you're pushing into your symptom a little bit, you can use that piece to create that safety.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think that will be really helpful for people who might have those questions. So I love, again, the OT perspective, breaking it down, making it doable. And I do think it's really important that for people who are listening, just to know wherever you're at is okay. Like, we just start where you are and move from there. And that's perfect. That's exactly how it's supposed
That's right.
Like, no,
that's right.
Yourself up for whatever you can or can't do. This is just, it is what it is. It's okay. We love you. You love you. It's going to be all right.
Totally.
From there.
and like, the modern approach to yoga is, people need to know, it's like not about what the poses look like. It's not about comparing yourself to anyone else. That's one thing that's kind of fun teaching online, because you're in your own living room and you can create your beautiful safe space. And I make a big deal of that for people, like, create this wonderful safe space for yourself. And you're not comparing yourself to anyone. You're just doing your thing and exploring and changing that fear into curiosity and exploration and a new movement. And I do talk also about how, we need to be able to bend down and get stuff out of the dishwasher, or it's functional to be able to move your head in every different way. And, and so yoga takes it slowly. It's a slow vestibular, but it still is very much vestibular activity and neck. So I also want to mention, it's for some people who are super active, like myself, it's also learning to rest. So within the yoga class, there's always rest points. And there's two types of people: those that come in and find it challenging, they're so happy to get to the rest. And then there's the people that don't want to rest because they're the go, go, go people. And they find it so hard to rest. And so that was a little bit me. I used to wiggle through my Shavasana pose, which is your final resting pose at the end. But now that has been, I guess, a gift of concussion has given me is being able to learn how to do that, how to rest, because I was kind of forced to. And now I see the beauty of it, right? So I think that can be a beautiful emotional and stress management technique, is truly learning the power of rest. And that is incorporated also into every yoga class. So yeah.
Thank you for that. You're not the first person who has mentioned that to me, that's a gift that they see from their concussion experience, is learning the skill of slowing down, because it's not something that is really emphasized or taught in our culture and society in general. So it is a skill, and it is a blessing. Like, it's an important part of life. And so I think that is a beautiful thing that yoga does bring out. And you mentioned a couple other things I just want to emphasize as well, because I really appreciate them. You talked about the co-regulation, and co-regulation is so important. Like, for nervous system regulation, we see it's let's see, my friend Leah Davidson talks about how healing is made in connection. And so that connection with the yoga instructor or whatever, when we're with other people and they're in a good place, then it really does, it has a calming effect on us. And it's helpful too. And I think especially for someone dealing with a brain injury, to see it and be able to copy it, so that you don't have to produce it yourself. Like if you're able to watch that and you're in that co-regulation kind of state, then you're like, oh, okay, I see this. I'm just going to do what they're doing. I don't have to put effort in or think about it. I'm just going to do that.
That's right. Yeah.
It's really helpful. Go ahead.
That's a really great point. And that's why my part of my program, part of my coaching and education is the yoga videos. So my clients get one every week and they can do it as many times as they want. This is like a 30-minute yoga class. And so, yeah, that's really been helpful for people.
Yes. Oh, I believe it. That's so awesome. And then the other piece is just that awareness, and I think that's something, again, that is not uncommon for people dealing with a concussion, is to not feel like they're fully in their body or be aware of their body or what's happening. Especially, it can be a trauma response, or like if you're in pain for a long time, then your body is like, your brain's just like, I don't want to know about you anymore, body. So kind of like turns it all off. And so that awareness and being in your body is actually so important for healing, because your body you need to be aware of it and where it is in space. Like all of these things are helpful in the healing process. So I think to see all of these things being key parts of the healing and like the beauty of yoga in healing. So
it is
really consider about. So thanks for breaking that all out for us. I think that's so
no
cool.
problem. Yeah, it is really cool to break it down, because you start to see all the benefits, the things it covers. And I have had clients who actually have come to me in tears after doing their first couple of yoga classes, because they're just like, oh my God, like I was completely dissociated from my body. And now, like, you're bringing my attention to all these things, my breath, my feet, like what was happening there, and they're overwhelmed, right? To come back into their body. So that's kind of cool. Yeah. I do think that's a big piece, because that's where you start to get back into becoming more spatially aware and, not missing the last stair, and noticing when you're shutting down your vision, all the things that you need to notice. Like mindfulness is being in the moment and noticing. That's what it is. And this is what we do in a yoga class. So, and then just to wrap up, more benefits in case you needed more. Before I started using yoga with post-concussion, I was using it with my neurodevelopmental clients. And I developed a program of integration of primitive reflexes through yoga. Now that was amazing. And so it was a full sensory integration session, a 15-minute yoga practice designed for that student. And it blew my mind, the changes in these students. So there's also the physical changes by going through certain poses that can really bilateral integration, crossing midline, all of the integration of these primitive reflexes. And interestingly, like neurodevelopment, post-concussion, we do lose we do go back, to some of these primitive reflexes. That's been a known neurological effect of concussion. So there's a neuro rehab piece. There's a neuro rehab piece and a cognitive rehab piece, because you're following sequencing. Yes. There's memory, there's focus, right? And certainly sensory integration. So there's a therapeutic piece there to yoga that I just wanted to just touch on for any therapists out there who might catch on to that.
Perfect. Oh my gosh, I love that. Thank you for like breaking that down. And also, the primitive reflex piece is so important and is a part of that. Those do come back a lot of times with TBI, and so reintegrating those is so important. And I can see how yoga would help with that. And then neuro rehab, cog rehab, sensory integration, the nervous regulation, the breathing, like all of it. Oh my gosh, it's
I know it's crazy.
This is so cool.
I know. And sometimes I want to mention, like, a lot of people get scared of yoga because there is this mindset like, oh, it's religious or something, which is not true. I mean, yes, it has history in India and certain, cultures practicing, and there's Sanskrit, and there's certain, they're not prayers, but like mantras that you say about peace and whatnot. But that doesn't make it religious. It's not a religious experience. It's just a healthy lifestyle. It's a practice of movement. It's a practice of breath. It's a practice of meditation, mindfulness. And even beyond that, it's like if you're living a healthy yogi lifestyle, people will say there's more components to it. It's like I'm compassionate, I am ethical, I am environmental, I am able to slow down, and there's so many cool things that you learn when you learn about sort of a healthy yoga practice and what it means. And so there's not a reason to really shy away from it for that reason. And there's also other people get scared about it because they just think of power yoga going so fast and upside down, and it doesn't need to be gymnastics. It can be just simple poses, right? Simple movements, simple breath work. It can be just sitting and doing a mindful activity like noticing the breath or singing Om, which is just basically a vagus nerve stimulation, like humming. So you have to kind of really get perspective and not be quick to judge about yoga. You got to really, it finds you, and you start to see what it's all about. And then you can recognize all these pieces, and you can pick and choose what kind of yoga you do and what you take from it. So yeah,
there are so many different kinds of yoga. I appreciate you bringing that up. And I do think I actually spoke with another girl who yoga is an important thing to her. She's a therapist, not she's a counselor kind of therapist, but she had her own concussion experience, and she found yoga to be very, very helpful for her. But she is, I believe, Hindu, and the religious part of it was very meaningful for her. So I think
yes.
It's cool that it can be, but like, I think that we can, if people are nervous about it as a religion thing, I think you're right. It doesn't have to, you don't have to include,
no.
But I do appreciate the spiritual part of it, of like grounding, being in your body, like the compassion, that like the peace, like all of that. I think that it's just kind of a generally healthy thing, regardless of where you're at on a spiritual journey necessarily.
It doesn't have to have a religious piece to it. It does not, no.
Yeah. But if you if you really wanted it to. So I think
it could if you want to. It's just the same way like meditation for some people is prayer, and it crosses over, and that's okay. If I do a gratitude practice, it's guaranteed going to end up in prayer, and that's okay. That's me. But for someone else, it's nature or whatever it is, and that's okay. So that's the piece you bring in personally to your own practice.
Beautifully said. Thank you for that. I love that. You also talked briefly, or it was in your intro or bio or something. You talked about like doing OT in nature and on the farm and things like that. I'm interested in hearing more about that and your vision walks. Can you tell us a little bit? I know yoga is a really important part of your practice. What other things do you include in it, and what does it look like?
That's an awesome question. So yeah, when I do see clients in person, because I do a hybrid, I have online clients where I do the recorded yoga and the coaching and the education, all that. But then when I see clients in person, I no longer work in a clinic. I now work in the community and at farms and at beaches. And I believe in the power of nature as a healer, as a healing thing. I do, again, live at sea level. I feel like there's a lot of oxygen to be had in the great outdoors where we live. And so that's a piece of it. And I always include breathing so that we are getting movement and breath outside. I also feel like there's so many challenges in nature that are just that we're trying to recreate in the clinic, but yet they're out there.
Right?
It's like logs and rocks on the beach, for example. I can do so much OT, like let's search for this sea glass. Let's walk from log to log. Let's tolerate the sound, the wind and the sound of the waves and the sunshine. And like, there's just so many things you can work on that are already out there. In North Vancouver, where I live, I took a client a few times hiking, and like there's roots and rocks. And I mean, it's a visual challenge. So we were able to morph out, the flat trails where she could get her cardio, and then the trails with all the roots and rocks. Then we were really turning on the visual system and the sensory motor. And when we were doing that, that used a lot more brain energy. So we had to, we were able to see the difference and then decide what you're going to do when, depending on what goal you're working on. So I can also help the client in the community to understand the practice. I've done bike rides where, again, we break down the activity. What's going on here? How you're feeling unsafe? Is it the leaves on the ground? Is it the traffic going by? Or is it your own balance? Like, what are the concerns? How can we adapt? How can we change your bike? How can we break this down? that kind of thing. And then the equestrian world is really fun. I get to work at a farm a few days a week because I really found it a grounding practice. They were looking for an OT, and I was like, oh, I can come and work with you guys. And we have everything from post-concussion to neurodevelopmental, neurodivergent clients. And we work with goats and horses and chickens and donkeys. And there's heavy work to be done. Hay in the wheelbarrows, taking it around. There's tacking and untacking the horse, grooming a horse. And all of this it's everything. It's just everything OT. I mean, it's fine motor goals, it's mindfulness goals, it's sensory integration. And it's just, when you get there on the farm, you are in your body, you're in the moment, and you're doing the thing. And this is so great for people to be able to, post-concussion too, to just be able to be in the moment and be doing this stuff that is so grounding and physical, and your vision is on because you're near horses, your awareness is on. And not everybody rides. A lot of my clients ride, but not everybody, especially if you're coming back from post-concussion. I explain to people, it's okay to come in and groom the horse and hang out with the horse, and you don't have to ride. Right? You're still getting the joy of being here on the farm. And same with my students. So we do farm therapy in a lot of different ways, but that's something, a little passion of mine, a side passion. So you see the odd horse on my Instagram, the odd goat. I think there's new goats coming up, so stay tuned for baby kids. But yeah.
Awesome. I don't know. As you're talking about that, I'm like, oh man, my uncle wrote a book recently. He grew up on a farm, and I'm like, these people who grew up in that would probably listen to this and be like, yeah, of course. This is so, like, we were just doing therapy all the time, like our whole life.
It's true. It's true. Everything. There's just so much packed in.
Yeah, so fascinating. And your point about how nature provides what we try to recreate in the clinic was cracking me up. It reminded me of like in a skilled nursing center, like rehab clinic space, you're a lot of times, like, sometimes we'll be working on helping people get dressed after they've been injured and it's challenging for them to bend over or whatever. So we'll like practice dressing, or like, but you're in a clinic and you can't do that. So you have to like pretend to put, like, let's make a circle with this TheraBand and we'll like loop it over your foot and pretend you're pulling up pants. Like, we're trying to recreate something that, if you're working in home health or something, you're just actually in their space and you don't have to pretend. It's like the similar thing with nature. You're like, oh no, let's actually just go out there. Like,
yeah,
let the world provide the environment.
Yeah, I've seen some good ones where in vision therapy and stuff, where they try to hang things from the ceiling and recreate like a forest, and then recreate the things you walk on. But there's a place for that, because in assessment and in looking at the micro components of dysfunction, it is helpful to be in a controlled environment, because then they can try to weed out what is what, and then also create some safety in the controlled environment. But it doesn't always just translate over into real life. I think it's really been helpful for me as a community OT to be helping the person actually do the thing in real life, because it doesn't just automatically transfer over. Sometimes the safety feeling is still not there. There's still so many uncontrolled variables when you go back out of the clinic. So it definitely has its place and its advantage to create a controlled environment. But then I think people are missing that piece of just having some assistance of getting back into real life. So I love being that missing piece.
I love that you're able to. And I think, yeah, you're right. There's definitely a space for it. And if you're in a situation where you can't go and do those things, and this is the next best option, it's definitely a good thing. But
yeah, I live in a place kind of like you do, is that it's nature based. I'm in British Columbia, Canada, by the ocean, in the mountains. And it's a part of life here. And so I guess that there's that. So that's really cool for people that live here, are very outdoorsy, and they want to get back usually into the outdoor, stuff. So there's that piece. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun. So yeah, that's kind of my OT world now. Definitely my experience has made me into a stronger OT. I've also gone and done more training. I'm part of a Concussion Nerds clinical space, which is detailed concussion mentoring and training. So I feel really good about that, knowing exactly what's going on with the rest of with the concussion world, being up to date, Bethany's also in that group. And yeah, and also just knowing what the clinics are doing. And then that gives me the opportunity to having the neuro understanding of rehab for post concussion. Then I can really put it into my practice, into the yoga and the real life stuff. So I love doing that. That's my.
I'm glad you brought up the concussion nerds thing. That was ask you about, because you've been in it longer than I have. I just recently joined. For people listening, it's Natasha Welch's program. She's also in Canada. She's a physiotherapist and has created a program. She helps people who are dealing with concussions, but also gives support to people who are clinicians who want to provide quality care, concussion care for people. So I really am loving her program so far, the stuff that I'm learning and the ways to just really understand the brain and how symptoms show up and why they're showing up. And it's good. I'm loving it so far. So, and as well as, the community, the aspect of being able to talk to other people who care about people dealing with concussions and really want to provide quality help. So is there anything else that you have learned or have loved about Concussion Nerds that you want to throw out there?
Just how detailed it is. I think your average clinician, PT, OT, anyone working in the concussion space is maybe just honestly a fraction of the way there when it comes to concussion therapy, I gotta say, without training like that, because there's just they go into the micro neurophysiology and the picking apart the details of each individual concussion. And it's just doing all the case studies and having all these discussions really expands your knowledge. And so I think it's just such a great thing that she's done, is put together a program like this and share it and try to get all people working in concussion, with a similar, to have this great educated background. And then it becomes so cool, a team approach to work with. I've had the opportunity, actually, I mentioned it in a story this week, was to work with quite a few clients who are also doing a concussion intensive. And I've really loved this combination because, they'll be working with me and they're going through, say we're getting started with their education and they're understanding what's happening with concussion. Then we start getting into nervous system and they're starting to understand their nervous system and how to manage it when they're starting to get symptoms. And then they hop into a 1 week detailed intensive where they get detailed assessment, their individual micro components of dysfunction. Then they get intensity, where now they already understand coming in what they have, some education background. They already know about breathing and grounding and trying to calm the nervous system when it's heightened because of symptoms. Now they're learning their individual dysfunction. Then they come back and they're doing the yoga with me, and we're reviewing what they're doing. They're getting weekly coaching, support for their exercise that they're now started, and everything. And it's just been coming together for them so amazingly, this combo, rather than just weekly therapy that's sort of untargeted and, oh, how's it going this week? Oh, how are you feeling, ready to get back to work? Okay, maybe just ride the bike some more. Okay, let's talk next week. Come on, how are your symptoms? That's not therapy. That's just not, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so it kills me because I think it's the way the system is set up. That's what so many people are that's what's available to them, or that's all they know that's available to them. And so, yes, having trained quality clinicians out there who can do something like this and can provide that, they're out there, people keep looking for them. I imagine, I don't even know, actually, maybe you can tell me, does Natasha have a list of all of clinicians, a resource guide for people so they can find people in their areas?
I think she's putting that together. So I will double check on that. I know within Nerds, we can go into the clinician database and find out who's doing intensives, who's doing work like myself, but I'm not sure what's available to the public. So that's a great question. Let's find that out. Yeah.
I have to ask her about that. But yeah, it's very, very cool. So I am very grateful for that. And we can put a link to Natasha's website in the show notes as well. So
that'd be great.
Speaking of websites and and getting information out to people. If people listen to this and are like, oh my gosh, I have to work with Shelley now. How do they do that? Where do they get information from you?
Okay. You can go on my website, otshelley.com with an EY. And, and there's direct links to email me there. I do read my emails. So that's easy. If you have questions or whatever, I'm totally open to that. There's also, I'm a big Instagrammer. So if you go on OT Shelley on Instagram, you can DM me there. You can go into my link tree and see some of the samples of stuff that I have to offer, a sample yoga class, whatnot. I do workshops and stuff. And my big program is a 3-month. I love to work with people over 3 months, quite fairly intensively, because I feel like this yields the most results. And wherever you are in your post-concussion journey, we go through, education, journaling, yoga, coaching, and we tailor it, to your questions and fit it into your life. And so that's my program's called 3, and that's my big baby. But I also do work here in BC in the community doing, one-to-one OT in person, like we were talking about, in those settings, in the nature settings. So if you live here near the Lower Mainland, I'm in Tsawwassen, BC, right by the ocean. I can see it right now at my window. And you can work with me in person. Otherwise, the online option is there. So yeah, that's where you can find me. Also Facebook, OT Shelley Facebook. So I just kind of go under my name everywhere. And from the website, you can discover the programs that I have to offer. But yeah, so.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Yes, all of that information will be in the show notes as well, so people can find you by clicking through there. But that's awesome. Thank you for doing what you're doing. I really it's so fun to talk to someone else who's as passionate about this and has such a similar educational background it's fun to see where you're going with this. And I love all of this, especially the yoga piece. I'm really grateful for you breaking that all down for us. And
no problem. Well, I think, I know you're a concussion coach too, Bethany, and it's exciting talking to someone in the same space. And when you get two OTs together, we just can't stop. So we have to stop ourselves. but yeah, it's exciting. And I think that's the key, is finding clinicians who love what they're doing. Not to brag, but definitely you and I have that going. And I think that's key, right? That's who you want to work with. So I appreciate this interview, and I love what we're both doing in the concussion space, and I think we should be.
It is.
We should be proud of. Yeah.
It's true. There's a lot of passion here. I love it. Well, yes. Yeah. Thank you. I'm so excited, and we'll get this out there, and people can find us and get some quality here.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.